This is an American story about how Americans figure it out and Americans share it with the rest of the world and Americans are the best. And like, that's particularly ugly with the fact that these aliens are trying to destroy the major cities around the world, except when it comes to, the places where we don't imagine there are major cities.
Have you ever had something you love dismissed because it's just pop culture? What others might deem stupid shit, matters. It's worth talking and thinking about. And so do we. So come overthink with us as we delve into our deep thoughts about stupid shit.
Hi, I'm Emily Guy Birkin, and you're listening to Deep Thoughts About Stupid Shit, because pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head? On today's episode, I'll be sharing my deep thoughts about the 1996 Roland Emmerich film, Independence Day, with my sister, Tracie Guy Decker, and with you. Let's dive in. So Trace shocked the hell out of me to learn that you had not seen this movie until last year or something.
I think it was a little longer ago than last year, but not much.
But tell me what you know about Independence Day.
Yeah, I think it was pre-COVID or maybe during COVID, but it's definitely in the past 5 years that I saw it for the first time. So I remember Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum both looking very attractive.
Oh my God.
I remember aliens and a virus. And that's how we get them because Americans are toxic. And I remember so the scene when Brent Spiner is the doctor and he gets the scientist and he gets slammed against the wall and then through his voice the alien goes, "Release me." Muppets from Space spoofs that. So that scene when I finally saw it was sort of like a validation of the Muppet movie. Which was hilarious and delightful to me. That, I'm watching it. I'm finally watching this cultural touchstone, and I'm like, "Oh, look, the Muppets!"
Whereas the Muppets were hoping you'd go, "Oh, look, Independence Day."
Independence Day. Yeah. Well, I'm a little backward about a lot of things. So anyway,
sometimes you put the alien before the horse.
What can I say? Muppets are my touchstone. So that's what I remember. But tell me, Em, aside from the fact that here we are right in front of the 4th of July, why are we talking about this film?
So this film came out in 1996. I was 17 years old. This was back when I saw at least one movie a week in theater. I was a avid consumer of pop culture and films specifically.
Just really quickly, the fact that it's 96, that actually makes a lot of sense to me now why I haven't seen it, because that was the middle of my college career.
Yeah.
So we were at very different kind of very specific moments in our lives in terms of consumption of pop culture. Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
So yeah, if there was a cultural touchstone from let's say 2011, I would have missed it because I was in the midst of early parenthood. And so television from my college years, I missed. I still consumed quite a lot of movies. It was also, there was a huge marketing campaign. So this was a movie that was not to be missed among my peer group. And I was very excited to see it. It also was, Will Smith was the hottest thing out there. And I was very excited to see him in this because he was at the height of his fame, the height of his charm, the height of his line delivery, because he is very funny in this movie. So I was really excited to see this movie. And I remember that summer, 1996, I went to the Kenyon Young Writers Program, which was over the 4th of July weekend. And I am trying to remember if I had seen it before I went or if we were talking about it, that I was going to see it afterwards. But there was definitely discussion among the other young writers about this movie. So it was important to those of us who were, around that age. It was important to, those of us who were in high school at the time. And it was huge. It was everywhere. It was a very expensive movie to make. And it was the biggest movie of 1996. Like, it was a blockbuster and made huge amounts of money, both in the United States and internationally, which is kind of incredible considering how America-centric this movie is. So on rewatching the film last night, and I've seen it many times since, the thing that really struck me, and there's several aspects of it. Now, there were a couple of things that bothered me, not necessarily when I saw it at 17, but, as I rewatched it, as I got older in my 20s, as I was studying cultural imperialism and things like that, was the way that it used American exceptionalism. And there's kind of a double-edged sword. So some of the American exceptionalism is good. And I found out there's some behind-the-scenes stuff with American exceptionalism in that the studio didn't want Will Smith as the lead because they didn't want a black actor. Yeah. I've lost who it was that they offered it to, who read the script and was like, this is garbage, and didn't want it. It was like Ethan Hawke or someone like that, but I might be misremembering. But they wanted a white actor.
So it wasn't just American exceptionalism, like, as the country. It was explicitly, like, white nationalist American.
Well, but that's the thing. So within, Roland Emmerich, who was born in Germany, so he's German-American, which I find interesting. But the American exceptionalism is that this group of disparate people, which is part of what America, fuck yeah, we do, is like, we is like, we are this disparate group of people and we work together and we make it work, is part of the American exceptionalism story we tell ourselves. So, like, there is this double-edged sword of American exceptionalism and nationalism. And there was some of that behind the scenes as well, because Roland Emmerich fought for Will Smith.
Oh, I see. So it was like corporate meddling.
Corporate meddling.
That didn't want Smith. I see.
That's one thing that was important to me about this film. The other thing that I was amused by as a 17-year-old, and I'm now realizing I felt seen without realizing how special it was feeling seen as an American Jew. Because Jeff Goldblum's character is Jewish, and his father, who's played by Judd Hirsch, is everybody's Jewish dad or grandpa, the father or uncle. I read something last night from a Jewish commentator saying that Judd Hirsch's character is a Jewish stereotype, or cringy Jewish stereotype. And I was asking my husband afterwards, I was like, have you seen it recently? He's like, because he didn't want to watch it with me. He's like, not recently. I was like, does he seem like a Jewish stereotype to you? And I was describing a couple of things. He's like, no, everyone's got that uncle. I was like,
isn't that the definition of a stereotype?
Yeah. But I feel like a stereotype is when it's turned up to 11, whereas this is not turned up to 11. It just is.
Okay. So you're saying it's a relatable character, not a caricature.
Yes, exactly. I feel like Judd Hirsch is just being Judd Hirsch. He's just calling himself Julius Levinson. Anyway, but I felt seen without realizing it at 17. I didn't realize how unusual it was to feel seen. And considering the last 18 months of being an American Jew, that felt really good last night watching this movie.
I hear that.
And then the other thing that I felt that was really interesting watching this last night was recognizing how much this film owed, like how much of this the DNA of this film was disaster movies. Disaster movies have never really been much of my favorites, but I remember watching Towering Inferno and The Poseidon Adventure with Dad growing up.
Yeah. He like dug those, right? Like I feel like he showed us Poseidon Adventure on purpose.
Yeah. There's something those share a DNA with a type of haunted house / murder mystery / there's only one left kind of story that I also enjoy.
I think there's something specific about the disaster films, though, that like kind of it provides that like, oh yeah, I could survive. Because you relate with the hero, and then it's like it gives a certain amount of comfort because these disasters are terrifying and there's very little one can do to actually survive. You know, it's a lot about luck. But then we put ourselves in the role of this hero who then survives, and we're like, oh yeah, I'll be all right. It's like a comfort.
There's also this sense of then there are people who are self-sacrificing to help everyone else.
Sure.
And then there are the people who die because of bad luck, but others are compassionate towards them. And we can put ourselves in these human moments and say, like, I wouldn't be the weasel. I would be the compassionate person who is like searching for survivors and helping who I can. And the ones who can't make it, I would stiff upper lip and be there for the children. And, you know, like there's something very like comforting and like I would be the good ones, not.
Right. It allows us to sort of stroke our own ego without having actually to go through the trauma.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. There's something about that. And so I feel like this is the first, I don't know, I might be wrong, but this marriage of disaster movie and science fiction is really interesting.
It is interesting. I do not think it's the first. I mean, aren't the like giant monster movies kind of that?
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
Like not King Kong, but like Godzilla, I feel like, and like other.
But do we actually get to know and care about the characters who die in those?
I haven't seen them in long enough, and like I've never seen the original Godzillas. I know the Matthew Broderick version.
Yeah, but that's also Roland Emmerich, and it came after.
But it was based on something earlier, right?
But
that's interesting that it's also Roland Emmerich. Anyway, sorry, we haven't even started the synopsis yet. I keep distracting you. I'm a bad influence today. So let me kind of remind you what's going on with this. I had forgotten. I thought this movie was a tight 90 minutes. That's how I remembered it. No. It's nearly 3 hours. Are you serious?
It's like 2 hours and 42 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's probably why it took me so long to watch it.
So the synopsis this time, I'm going to do something a little bit different because the way this movie is set up, we are introduced to a bunch of different groups of characters who end up converging on Area 51 in Nevada. And so I'm going to like introduce the different characters and then kind of talk about in broad strokes what happens. So the characters are, Will Smith is basically our protagonist. We don't meet him until like 20 or 30 minutes into the movie. But his name is Captain Stephen Hiller. He is a Marine and fighter pilot. He's a squadron leader with the Black Knight Squadron, stationed at El Toro in California. He wants to be an astronaut. He is in a relationship with a woman named Jasmine, who has a little boy named Dylan, who is not Steve's son. But he is very serious about Jasmine. He's bought an engagement ring for her. But his friend Jimmy, who is played by Harry Connick Jr.
Oh, another very handsome man.
So beautiful. Steve gets a rejection from NASA. Jimmy says, "You're never going to get to fly the shuttle if you marry a stripper," because that's what Jasmine does for a living. Then we meet President Thomas J. Whitmore, who's played by Bill Pullman. He is a former fighter pilot and a Gulf War veteran. He is married to Marilyn Whitmore, who's played by Mary McDonnell. So the president is in the White House. The first lady is in Los Angeles for some sort of conference. When we meet them, they're on the phone talking about how she's heading home after the conference at a luncheon. They have a small child, Patricia, played by Mae Whitman. So she's like about 7. I mean, very little girl. So that's the first family. Then also in the White House is Constance Spano, who is the director of communications. So she's got the Carolyn Levitt's job now. Connie's ex-husband is David Levinson, played by Jeff Goldblum.
Wait, who's Connie?
Constance, the
communications.
Yeah.
Okay.
David Levinson, played by Jeff Goldblum. He's MIT educated and he's a satellite engineer and tech expert, but he works for a cable company in New York City. His father is Julius Levinson, played by Judd Hirsch. So there are multiple people we meet at David's workplace as well. There are several other people in the government that I kind of skipped over. There's General William Gray, who's the commandant of the United States Marine Corps. He's played by Robert Loggia. There is the Secretary of Defense and former CIA Director Albert Nimzicki, played by James Rebhorn. There is Major Mitchell, who is from the U.S. Air Force. He's a commanding officer at Area 51. We meet him later on, but he's played by Adam Baldwin. And we also meet, in California, an alcoholic former fighter pilot named Russell Case, played by Randy Quaid, who I think is just being himself. He is a crop duster. When we first meet him, he's dusting the wrong field. He has 3 children named Miguel, Alicia, and Troy. And I think that's the characters. So characters are based in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. So as the film begins, there's a shadow over the moon, over where the American flag is planted from the moon landing in 1969. There's a giant ship coming towards Earth. Things break off from it, and like enormous ships come over and like settle over major cities all over the world, including Los Angeles, New York, and DC. They start scrambling cable signals. Jeff Goldblum, is looking at like the signal that's scrambling it, and he's like, oh, if we just wait 7 hours, it'll clear up, because he realizes the signal is like binary and it's a countdown. And then like finally looks at what the president is saying in the intelligence briefings. He's like, oh no, that's not a countdown until it goes away. It's a countdown until destruction. So he tries to call his ex-wife, Connie. It turns out that they divorced because he felt like she was spending too much time on her political career, and she hangs up on him because she refuses to listen to him because he's saying, you have to get out of the White House. And she's like, oh, this old saw. He goes to get his father because he doesn't drive. You see Jeff Goldblum go everywhere on a bike. So he goes to get his father, who has a car, and they drive down to DC. So this obviously takes forever, and they only have 7 hours. And basically are able to, at the very last moment, convince the president, who he has longstanding beef with. The president's only been in office a little while, but before he became president, they got into a fist fight because he accused him of having an affair with Connie. So he's able to convince him this is a countdown, and they're able to take Marine One, the helicopter, out and then get to Air Force One and get away. And there's that iconic shot of the White House being destroyed. So meanwhile, New York is being destroyed. We see several of David's coworkers getting killed. In Los Angeles, Steve Hiller, Will Smith, has been called to the Army base, or the Marine base rather. He has told Jasmine, hey, just in case, why don't you and Dylan pack up a few things and come to the base, just to be safe. And she has gone into her workplace just to pick up her check. She's talked into working. So she's running behind. And she sees, that people are like gathering on rooftops to welcome the aliens. The first lady is delayed in leaving and is also seeing people on rooftops. So Jasmine and her son Dylan are stuck in traffic trying to get out when the destruction comes. Even as a 17-year-old, I was like, oh, no. They're in this like tunnel and like balls of fire are coming. They have their dog with them. And there's this like locked door for like some sort of access panel. She manages to kick the door open, gets in, and like calls the dog, who comes running and jumps in with the balls of fire behind him. It was like, why would the fire not go in there? There's oxygen. Yeah.
Don't bother me with physics here.
I love animals. I do. And like, I care whether or not Boomer the dog lives. I do. But what about all the people?
That's not how movies work, Em.
All those people are dying. And you want me to care about the golden retriever?
That is how movies work.
Anyway, so Jasmine, Dylan, and Boomer make it. Meanwhile, Hiller and the rest of the Black Knight Squadron are sent to shoot at the giant ship over Los Angeles. It does nothing because they have shields. little fighter pilots from the giant ship come after them, and all of the squadron are taken down except for Hiller, who manages to shake all of them except for one. He is able to eject and destroy both his and the other ship and pulls the alien out. He has the welcome to Earth line before he punches it, and then like wraps it up in his parachute and is dragging it through the desert. So meanwhile, Jasmine has found a municipal truck, found the keys in the visor, which is just have them be in the ignition.
That's how movies work.
Well, but it was abandoned. It would make sense if it was abandoned in the ignition. But you know what? Okay, Roland, it's fine. It's fine, Roland. It's fine. I'll give you that, Roland. Anyway, so it's this huge municipal truck, and she's going around and gathering whatever survivors she can find. She finds the First Lady, who has been very, very badly injured.
Oh, wow.
So she is heading to El Toro base to try to get to Steve. Steve in the desert comes across the caravan of RVs, which includes Randy Quaid's Russell Case, because that's where he and his kids live, among a whole bunch of other people. And he says, I saw a base as I was flying over. They're like, it's not on the map. He's like, I know it's there. And so they take him there. While on Air Force One, there's a large argument between the president and a bunch of other people. And Julius says, like, what about Area 51? And the president's like, I assure you, there's no Area 51. And Nizmicki, who is the former CIA head and the current Secretary of Defense and the human antagonist, is like, well... And so they come to Area 51, where they meet Brent Spiner's Dr. Okun, who is just Dr. Noonien Singh from Star Trek The Next Generation.
Totally.
So he shows them they have a crash-landed vehicle from the 50s, one of their little fighter pilot spaceships, and they have 3 alien bodies on ice. Steve shows up. They don't want to let him in, and they're like, you have to have clearance. And he's got, this whole caravan of RVs. He's in the back of a pickup truck. He's like, oh, you want clearance? I'll show you clearance. And he like opens up the parachute and shows them the alien body. And they're like, whoa, okay, let him in. And so that leads to the scene that you remember, the release me, because they start trying to operate on it, and it's not dead and causes all kinds of havoc.
And has some sort of like psychic.
Yes.
Something.
Because they determined it doesn't have any kind of vocal cords. So the only way it can possibly communicate is telepathically. So it does something to Brent Spiner, Dr. Okun, and then it beams its thoughts to the president and tells him basically, this is what we do. We're locusts.
Y'all are in trouble.
Yeah. So they decide to try to nuke the next ship that is over Houston, because that's the only possible way to just, destroy it. That doesn't work. And they've nuked Houston. David, who is very idealistic, is like freaking out because what's the point? Let's just destroy the planet. Then they won't want it anymore. His father finds him and says, we all lose our faith sometimes. I haven't spoken to God since your mother died. And he says something that gives David the idea, like, oh, what if we give them a computer virus and then we can bring down the shields? Steve learns that the El Toro base has been destroyed. He steals a helicopter to go look for Jasmine, finds her, brings everyone back. The First Lady lives long enough to see the president and her daughter and then dies. And Goldblum says, David says, let's take the old ship to the mothership. I can give it a computer virus that'll take down the shields. And then we can use fighter pilots to destroy the ships. And then, victory, all good stuff. Nizmicki, the weasel, is like, this is terrible. You've made so many mistakes.
This is the CIA guy?
The CIA/Secretary of Defense. And the president fires him. And says, yeah, let's go ahead with this, but we're going to need more pilots. So they all right, we need as many pilots as possible, and they coordinate across the world. They have to use Morse code to reach out to everyone across the world because the aliens are using their satellites. And they're able to do that. Steve and Jasmine get married before they go. Connie tries to convince David that he doesn't have to go because she's like, great, now he's ambitious. And we see Russell sober up and say, okay, I'm gonna do this, be a fighter pilot. Steve and David are able to get to the mothership. They upload the virus, no problem. Like, yeah, I have to try 3 times to get my get a thumb drive in.
Right, or to like connect to Instagram and Facebook, but
yeah, Bluetooth is not able to connect ever on the first try.
Also, like, aliens write in computer languages that David knows.
Well, he's brilliant. He went to MIT, so
They use C++, obviously.
Yeah. But they're stuck. They can't get out. So they have a nuclear missile and 30 seconds to get out. So they're like, okay, we'll set that off, and they know they're going to die. So they set that off, and then they're unstuck, and they're like, oh, maybe we can get out. And so they're able to just barely make it out. The fighter pilots are trying to destroy the ships, but even with the shields down, they're not making enough of a difference until Russell Case flies up into the ship as it is opening to put out its like laser beam, huge Death Star weapon.
Right, like from the meme with the,
which brings it down, destroys it. And so we see rejoicing across the world, including really offensive, like African children wearing very little and holding spears, rejoicing. And I mean, it's just awful.
I thought there were ships above all, like lots of major cities around the world.
Yeah.
But only one had whatever the guy's name was go up into its belly.
No, they say, now we know what does it. So share around the world. Share around the world what they need to do.
So it's a repeatable disaster for the...
It's a repeatable thing, yes.
Right.
So then they go out to the desert they're like, okay, we need to go get Hiller and David, and they find them. They're looking fine walking out of the desert. Like, damn. That is, I remember going to Erica's house and we watched it. We rewound and watched and rewound and watched the two of them walking in the desert in those flight suits. I think like 10 minutes worth.
And apparently we are now mapping Emily's erotic map.
Well, I was texting Tracie last night going like 1996 era, Jeff Goldblum is my sexual orientation, apparently. We have reached the end of it. The one thing I glossed over was Bill Pullman, the president, saying, today we celebrate our independence. It is fitting that it is July 4th, American independence, but it will be the world's independence.
Oh, we are all Americans now.
Yes.
All right. Where are we going to start with it? I mean, are we going to start with American exceptionalism since we just said that?
I want to start in the good place. Okay. Rather than
we'll make it a sandwich.
Let's make it let's the shit sandwich. We'll put the shit in the middle. I don't want to put that. Let's not lead with that. Yeah, let's start with the marble rye that I really enjoy.
Okay.
So feeling seen as an American Jew, because I so enjoyed Judd Hirsch as Julius Levinson. I so enjoyed the relationship between David and Julius. So when we meet them, they're playing chess in the park in New York City. And Julius is like haranguing David in that like very particular Jewish parent to son or child way, where he's like, you're still wearing your wedding ring. What, it's been 4 years since the divorce? And David's like, it's been 3. It's like, it's not healthy. And David's like, you're smoking. That's what's not healthy. Like there's just... It is so familiar and so delightful. And I'm like, afterwards, I'm like, is Roland Emmerich Jewish? Because he wrote it along with the producer Dean Devlin. And no, Emmerich is not Jewish. Dean Devlin has a Jewish father and a Filipino mother. And apparently he based the Judd Hirsch's character on his uncle. And so I was like, okay, all right, that's where this is coming from.
All right.
Like, this is from life, clearly. And then the thing that I also really loved, and I think this is also partially coming from Hirsch and Goldblum themselves, Jeff Goldblum gets up because they're playing chess and Goldblum wins, like completely surprising Hirsch. And says, checkmate, Pops. He gets up and he goes over and he puts his arms around his father and he gives him a big kiss on the cheek. And he's like, all right, I'll see you later, Pops. I love you. And the affection that is so natural and
Unashamed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly the word.
Which we do not see very often in pop culture between two grown men, even father and son.
And in the biggest film of 1996, the cultural touchstone of the 90s. And then the fact that when David is freaking out, so we see multiple times, so the other thing that David is giving his father a hard time about is he has coffee in a styrofoam cup. He's like, do you know how long it takes for these to decompose? And David is like looking at the chessboard and his father says, I'm decomposing while you're deciding where you want to. They're having that kind of back and forth.
The banter.
Yeah. And he's constantly like, there's a recycling bin right here and blah, 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 blah. And meanwhile, there's so much product placement and it's like a Fruitopia thing, which I'm like, oh my God, do you remember Fruitopia?
I don't. Was that a soda or something?
It was a juice drink. Like if you see it, you'll be like,
I'll recognize it. Yeah.
And then Coke cans everywhere and stuff like that. Anyway, so you constantly see him and when he says he's going, when he's talking to Connie and she's like, now you're ambitious, he says, well, I've always been trying to save the planet. So when he's freaking out after they nuke Houston and he's just like, his dad's like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm making a mess. I'm destroying everything because, if we mess up the planet, maybe they don't want it. And his father says to him, we all lose faith sometimes. I haven't spoken to God since your mother died.
Yeah, you said that in your synopsis.
That really struck me because the fact that his father understands what David's faith is and recognizes that it is just as real and just as meaningful as his own faith in God, in the Torah. That feels very Jewish too. And then as David is leaving to get on the spaceship, he gives Julius his kippah and Torah.
Torah?
Yeah.
Like a book? A Tanakh?
Like a book. Uh-huh. Yeah. Like a Tanakh. It's a Tanakh. And it says just in case. And there's a point where Area 51 is deep underground and they get all...
Wait, sorry. Julius gives it to David or
no,
David
gives it to Julius. He has it.
Okay. Okay.
There's no explanation of how he has it, why he has it. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but whatever.
Yeah.
Area 51's deep underground. They have gotten all the people in the RVs down. And so Julius has put the kippah on and he started praying and he brings people around. He's like, come around. And he's just started praying and he's probably the only Jew there. I mean, really, What are the odds? And Nizmiki, the weasel, comes to sit down and Julius has started praying. And Nizmiki says, but I'm not Jewish. And Julius says, nobody's perfect. Another one feels so seen. So all of that, it's just lovely to have in a major motion picture,
That wasn't telling a Jewish story.
That wasn't telling a Jewish story,
Yeah.
And that's part of the nice part of American exceptionalism, because Hezbollah asked for parts of this film to be cut or banned, or the film to be banned or boycotted, because there are points where they're reaching out to people internationally where you see camps with Israeli flags and Palestinian flags where they're working together.
Oh, wow.
And then they also were it's propaganda that a Jewish scientist figures it out. They said that. And Jeff Goldblum responded, clearly you're not paying attention to the film because it's people working together figure it out.
Right.
And that is part of what's the idealism.
The positive side.
The idealism of American exceptionalism.
Right. The idea that our diversity is our strength.
Yes.
Which we seem to have forgotten lately.
Yes. There's a scene that I remember really sticking with me as a 17-year-old when Jasmine has found the First Lady. She doesn't say anything to her about having recognized her, but she's like, taking care of her, being very kind to her as best she can in this wasteland. And she brings her son over, like they're talking a little bit. And she brings her son over and says, Dylan, come meet the First Lady. And so Marilyn says, I didn't realize you'd recognized me. And Jasmine says, well, I didn't want to make a big deal of it. So Marilyn asks, so what do you do for a living? She says, I'm a dancer. She's like, oh, ballet. She says, no, exotic. And the First Lady says, oh, I'm sorry. And Jasmine says, I'm not. I make a good living. It's good money. I have my own house. And what I do for I'll do anything for my son. And he's worth it. And the First Lady has this like kind of look of like, I don't know, it's this very interesting conversation between these two women of very different social classes. And that is another aspect of like what I feel like Roland Emmerich was trying to say. He was trying to make it clear that NASA was wrong. And Harry Connick Jr.'s character was correct when saying, like, you're not going to be able to fly the shuttle if you're married to a stripper. Like, I think that is a correct assessment, that NASA would not do that.
Right, but Emmerich is judging NASA for that.
And Emmerich is judging NASA for it and making it clear, like, that Jasmine has nothing to be ashamed of. And the First Lady was wrong.
And does she come to see that? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and that's another aspect of it. Part of American exceptionalism is like you can make your way in whatever way works for you. And that Jasmine is in a lot of ways the like compassionate heart of this film, because you see her at every point doing whatever she can to take care of the people around her, including another one of the dancers. She has a conversation with a dancer who wants to go greet the aliens. And she's like, please don't. I got a bad feeling about this. Please get out of town. And, she's the one who she finds this truck, and instead of using it just to get out, she's trying to find other survivors.
Gathering survivors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's lovely. That's lovely. On the other hand, this is an American story about how Americans figure it out, and Americans share it with the rest of the world, and Americans are the best.
Right. We turn everyone into Americans.
Yes.
Especially with the Independence Day and the 4th of July thing.
Yeah. And that's particularly ugly with the fact that these aliens are trying to destroy the major cities around the world, except when it comes to, the places where we don't imagine there are major cities.
Where we Americans don't imagine.
Yeah.
Right.
There's really thriving, beautiful major cities.
Yeah, right.
And that's, ew. I didn't see that as a 17-year-old. I remember being ugh, a little bit with the images of I thought it was cities when we see the very stereotypical
tribe. The tribal.
Yeah.
I'm putting quotes around that word.
But I didn't have the ability to
you didn't have the analysis.
Articulate that.
Yeah.
But it's also, there are just as or even more brilliant analysts.
Yeah.
All around the world.
All over the world. All over the world. Yeah.
So, why is it all Americans? Why are we not coordinating with other people throughout all of this?
Right.
And so that kind of brings me a little bit to one thing that actually Roger Ebert brought up in his review of it, is that this is very skin deep science fiction. And part of that is because it's a disaster movie, but it doesn't ask deep questions. It's it's a video game science fiction. It's oh, it's bad guys. Let's get rid of them. But it doesn't ask all right, so if this is what they do, what's their original planet like? How do they live? Why are they doing this?
Their why, all those things.
Why did they send something here in the 50s? If they have telepathy, what do their pacifists do? Are they...
Yeah. In our recent episode about Firefly and Serenity, we talked about sort of what is really appealing about science fiction or any kind of non-realistic drama that looks at, asks the what if questions and then spins out the answers. And I think what you're saying here about this and the skin deep science fiction is that it didn't even ask the what if. It just said, we need a bad guy. Let's make it an alien. And didn't go any further. There are no what ifs.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like, it doesn't even really ask like the human what ifs.
Yeah. I mean, it does a little with the people who are like, I'm going to go greet the alien.
Yeah. I mean, there's a teensy bit of that. Like, how would people react to this? And like, there's a teensy bit of like, I read this great book called Space Opera by, I think, Kat Valenti, where basically to determine if a new species discovered, and we're the new species, humans are, you have to compete in a singing competition because art is how you determine it. And so since David Bowie, Prince, and like several others are dead, there's the character, David Bowie, Prince, Freddie Mercury are dead, the character has to compete. And one of the things that it says is like, you know, upon meeting new alien, people generally fall into one of two categories. They want to kill it or fuck it.
Okay.
And I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's about right. Even that, like, I was noticing, like, after Jimmy dies, Harry Connick Jr.'s character dies, there's a moment where Will Smith goes, no, Jimmy. And then he's like, you know, fighting for his life. But then he's like dragging the alien through the desert, quipping. And it's hilarious. He's like, you know, like, I'm not mad, you know, this is supposed to be my weekend off. And what the hell is that smell? And it's hilarious. But at the same time, he doesn't know what's happening with Jasmine and the little boy he thinks of as his son. His best friend is dead, as is his entire squadron.
It's also kind of like Will Smith's shtick.
Exactly.
So,
but that to me, it's a movie. You know, like that.
Yeah.
That to me takes me out of the story and tells me,
yeah, it breaks the illusion.
I'm watching
for you.
a movie.
Yeah.
I'm not
right.
I'm not seeing a story of how humans would handle this.
Yeah, I hear that.
Mm-hmm.
We are running out of time, and I want to make sure you get to the things that you want to get to. So, do you want to come back around to the marriage of disaster movies and science fiction at all?
I think that combination of disaster movie and science fiction is really an interesting. I think it's an interesting genre combination because it seems like a natural fit in a lot of ways. But I think that it has the problem of being skin deep.
I think that's exactly right. I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
It sort of necessitates the skin deep because in order to get the trappings of the disaster film, we don't have time to spend. We don't have like the real estate, if you will, the airtime real estate to spend on the what ifs that make science fiction more than skin deep.
And that's why when you get to we'll give the computer a virus, like it has to be that easy. It has to be that quick because otherwise you're going to have, instead of a 3-hour movie, you're going to have a 7-hour movie.
Right. Even with that, it was a 3-hour movie.
Exactly.
Right. Even with that super easy, like killing the big bad was actually not that hard once you figured out how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. If there was one other thing that do we need to circle back to?
Oh, I do find it really interesting that Roland Emmerich is German-American and was born in Germany. And this is such an America fuck yeah movie.
I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense. It's like the zeal of the convert.
Yeah. And there's the zeal of the convert. There's also, he's German-American, which I can remember when I spent 6 months in France with a host mother who was just barely old enough to remember World War II. And she at one point asked me what I thought of Germans, where she was talking about her best friend was British and they fought like cats and dogs. And but like had this deep affection for each other. And she said like that's how she felt about the English, is that they bickered, but they loved each other, where she was very, very polite with Germans, but did not trust them because of her experience remembering World War II. And I told her I felt bad. I felt very bad for Germans my age and anyone who was born after World War II. And she's like, really? And I was like, well, you know, you live with this legacy that
you have no control over.
You have no control over. You're born into.
And it's so horrific. Yeah.
And so I feel like Emmerich, who was, you know, born after World War II, it would be very, what's the word I'm thinking of? Appealing to think of like that American exceptionalism where you can remake yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would be a very appealing kind of sensation to want to take on. I can see that.
That makes sense. Let me see if I can reflect back quickly some of the highlights that we talked about in this movie. There was a lot actually that we talked about here. So in no particular order, in fact, I'll start with the most recent, is sort of like you named a certain skin deep science fiction in this film that like kind of puts aliens in the role of bad guys, but doesn't actually ask the deep what if questions that make science fiction really interesting. And that we agreed that we seem to have a consensus that actually is necessitated by the fact that this is a science fiction disaster mashup, science fiction disaster film mashup. It's not pure science fiction. It's science fiction as disaster film. And there just isn't room in the story for the deeper kind of what ifs and iterating of science fiction at its core that asks these interesting questions, these deep, deep questions. You spent quite a bit of time kind of unpacking the American exceptionalism in this film, both what is good about it insofar as like our diversity is our strength and like a whole bunch of misfit, disparate people pulling together for the greater good and that sort of that mythos of America that remains appealing. And certainly we understand how the German-American writer-director would have latched onto that potentially, especially given his German heritage that you just talked about and sort of the legacy of Nazism in his history to try and like rebuild oneself and remake oneself, not based on even one's profession, but just one's like moral character, as epitomized by Jasmine, the exotic dancer who is the emotional heart of this film. But there's also an American exceptionalism, which is just kind of jingoism, which doesn't even see people in the rest of the planet as people. But there's no sense that there are scientists in China or in Turkey or in Bogota or in Lagos who could have helped,
or Mozambique,
or yeah, like there's no sense that that there are
brilliant minds, all over the world,
humans around the world, right? It's just missing, and there's also like just straight up like racist images of these like stereotypical African tribal people celebrating the destruction of the aliens, which is
icky,
kind of icky. You also talked at some length about sort of feeling seen as an American Jew because we have this strong relationship in a very thick Jewish accent between Julius and David that kind of recognizes different ways of being faithful, that sort of says to someone like, you're not Jewish? Well, nobody's perfect. That just is kind of delightful and like feels like you're in on the joke, I think, is sort of what I heard there. And also within that, which is not necessarily Jewish explicitly, but is beautiful, the relationship between father and son, this unashamed affection, including physical affection, which we never get, or almost never get, between two grown men who are presumably straight in mainstream media, especially not in the mid-90s. And the fact that this was in this blockbuster, like hugely expensive and highly promoted film that everyone was talking about in 1996 feels really special. Let me see. I think that those are the main things that we talked about. I mean, I think on the Jewish question, there was a little bit of conversation about like, is Judd Hirsch's character a stereotype in a negative sense? And we kind of made the distinction between being a character that reads as true, useful, not universal, versus being a caricature, which exaggerates to humorous extent, like different components. In terms of this, let me just come back really quickly to the skin deep science fiction. That also led to a sense that the solution was like really friggin' easy because the aliens apparently code in Linux or C++ or something else that Jeff Goldblum's character, David, would know, even though they don't like have mouths or vocal cords and only communicate via telepathy, they obviously code in a language that Jeff Goldblum can speak.
I mean, coding is universal, of course.
Yeah, clearly. One other thing, and then I'll turn it over to see if there's anything that I missed, and then we really need to wrap up, is the fact that Smith's shtick in the desert was hilarious, but actually broke the illusion for you because it did not feel truthful. It did not feel plausible for a man who had just been through what he'd been through.
Yes. Yeah.
And there were other moments like that, like the fireballs in the tunnel.
Damn dog. I mean, like, yeah, I'm glad the dog lived, but
right. But it broke the illusion. It made you remember you're in a movie.
Yes, very much so.
Anything I forgot? And then we need to say goodbye.
I still can't believe you didn't see it until you're in your 40s.
Until a few years ago. And it was a validation of a Muppet movie for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So next time, what are you bringing me?
Pretty sure I'm bringing you weird science next time.
Ooh.
I think that's not going to be a good one.
I'm really worried about how that's going to go.
I don't think that's going to hold up. I haven't rewatched it yet, but I do not have high hopes for this one.
All right. We'll see you then.
See you then.
This show is a labor of love, but that doesn't make it free to produce. If you enjoy it even half as much as we do, please consider helping to keep us overthinking. You can support us at our Patreon. There's a link in the show notes. Or leave a positive review so others can find us. And of course, share the show with your people. Thanks for listening. Our theme music is Professor Umlaut by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Find full music credits in the show notes.
Thank you to Resonate Recordings for editing today's episode.
Until next time, remember, pop culture is still culture. And shouldn't you know what's in your head?